The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage, echoing like a gunshot in the humid August night. Above me, the rusted underbelly of Mrs. Henderson's 2003 Honda Civic leaked transmission fluid onto my forehead, a perfect metaphor for my life, really. Drop by drop, everything was falling apart. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Brad, get your pathetic ass in here. Natalie's voice cut through the night air like a rusty blade. My friends want to meet the man who can't even afford to take his wife on a decent vacation. Laughter erupted from inside our house, shrill, artificial laughter that made my teeth ache. Through the garage window, I could see the glow of our living room, packed with Natalie's real estate colleagues and their perfectly coiffed spouses. The birthday party I'd been dreading for weeks was in full swing, and I was exactly where I belonged, underneath a broken-down car, covered in other people's problems. I wiped the transmission fluid from my eyes with the back of my hand, leaving a streak of grease across my forehead. 38 years old, and this was my kingdom. A two-car garage that smelled like motor oil and broken dreams. The HVAC repair business I'd built from nothing was circling the drain, thanks to 3 major clients who'd decided to stiff me on payments. Meanwhile, Natalie was selling million-dollar homes to tech executives who'd moved to our little Michigan town during the pandemic. Brad Thompson, you worthless piece of shit. Natalie's voice was getting closer. Don't you dare embarrass me by hiding out there all night. I closed my eyes and counted to 10, then 20. Then I stopped counting because math had never been my strong suit. Just ask Natalie. She reminded me of that fact at least twice a week, usually when the credit card bills arrived. The garage door burst open, and there she stood in all her glory. Natalie had always been beautiful in that high-maintenance, Instagram-ready way that required 2 hours of preparation just to check the mail. Tonight, she'd outdone herself. Her blonde hair was perfectly curled, her makeup was flawless despite the heat, and her little black dress probably cost more than I made in a week. She looked like $1 million, which was fitting since she spent money like we had it. There you are, she said, her voice dripping with disgust. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? My boss is in there, my biggest clients are in there, and my husband is out here playing with cars like a teenager. I slid out from under the Honda and sat up, my back popping in 3 places. Sorry, honey. Mrs. Henderson needs her car tomorrow morning, and Mrs. Henderson can take the fucking bus. Natalie's perfect composure cracked for just a moment, revealing the rage underneath. This is my night, Brad. My birthday, my career, my friends. And you're out here working on some old lady's piece of shit car for what, $50? 85, I corrected, immediately regretting it. Natalie's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. $85. Jesus Christ, Brad. Do you know what I made in commission last week? $12,000 in 1 week. And you're out here celebrating $85 fucking dollars like you just won the lottery. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. At 6'2", I still had a few inches on Natalie, even in her heels, but somehow she always made me feel small. I know you're successful, Nat. I'm proud of you. I just thought... You thought what? That you could suggest we go camping in some shitty state park for our anniversary? That you could embarrass me in front of Janet Morrison, who just bought a house in the Hamptons? Natalie stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume mixed with wine and something else. Something that didn't belong. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to someone who peaked in high school? The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard variations of this speech before, but never with an audience. Through the open garage door, I could see faces pressed against our kitchen window. Natalie's friends were watching the show, their phones probably already recording. You're right, I said quietly. Natalie blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. What? You're absolutely right. I am a worthless piece of shit. I am an embarrassment. I did peak in high school. I grabbed a shop rag and wiped my hands, slowly, deliberately. And you deserve so much better than me. Brad, no, really. You should be with someone who can afford to take you to the Hamptons. Someone who wears a suit to work instead of coveralls. Someone who doesn't smell like motor oil and disappointment. I tossed the rag onto my workbench and looked her straight in the eye. Someone like Derek. Natalie's face went white. What are you talking about? Nothing, sweetheart. Just agreeing with you. I walked past her toward the house, then stopped at the doorway. Enjoy your party. I'm going to Marty's. You can't just leave. These are important people. I turned back to look at her one more time. In the harsh, fluorescent light of the garage, I could see the cracks in her makeup, the desperation in her eyes. For just a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Tell them I had to work, I said. They'll understand. After all, someone has to pay for all this. I walked through the house without looking at anyone, grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter, and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Natalie's voice rising in pitch as she tried to explain to her guests why her husband had just walked out on her birthday party. He's been under a lot of stress lately, she was saying. The business isn't doing well, and he's been drinking more and... I closed the front door behind me, cutting off her excuses. Let her spin whatever story she wanted. I had bigger problems to worry about, like the text messages I'd seen on her phone last week. Messages from someone named Derek, complete with gym selfies and promises to make her feel like a real woman again. Messages that made it clear my wife had been getting her cardio somewhere other than the treadmill in our basement. I climbed into my pickup truck, a 2015 Ford F-150 with 180,000 miles and a transmission that slipped in third gear, and started the engine. Through our living room window, I could see Natalie gesturing wildly as she talked to her friends. One of them was definitely filming with her phone. Perfect. By tomorrow morning, half the town would know that Brad Thompson was a deadbeat husband who couldn't even show up for his wife's birthday party. The other half would know by noon. I put the truck in gear and headed for Marty's Tavern, the only place in town where nobody gave a shit about real estate commissions or Hampton vacations. As I drove through our neighborhood, a collection of modest ranch houses and fading dreams, I caught myself smiling for the first time in weeks. If Natalie wanted to play games, I was ready to play. And unlike her, I actually knew the rules. Marty's Tavern sat on the corner of Main and 3rd like a middle finger extended toward the gentrification creeping through our town. While Natalie's crowd sipped wine at the new gastropub downtown, the real locals still came to Marty's for cheap beer and honest conversation. The neon Budweiser sign in the window flickered like a dying heartbeat, and the parking lot was full of pickup trucks and motorcycles that had seen better decades. I found Marty behind the bar, polishing glasses with a towel that had probably been white sometime during the Clinton administration. Martin O'Sullivan had been my best friend since high school, back when we both thought we'd conquer the world. Instead, we'd conquered nothing except the art of making do with less. Well, well, Marty said as I slumped onto a bar stool. If it isn't the birthday boy, shouldn't you be home cutting cake and pretending to like your wife's friends? Give me a beer, Marty. The strongest thing you've got. That'd be Bud Light, and you know it. He slid a bottle across the scarred wooden bar. What happened? You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes. I took a long drink and let the cold beer wash the taste of humiliation from my mouth. Around us, the usual suspects were engaged in their usual activities, playing pool, arguing about sports, and slowly pickling their livers. These were my people, the ones Natalie called losers and has-beens, when she thought I wasn't listening. She's cheating on me, I said. Marty stopped polishing glasses. You sure about that? Derek Morrison. Remember him? 2 years behind us in school, played JV basketball until he got cut junior year. Now he owns that fancy gym downtown, the one with the juice bar and the yoga classes. CrossFit Central. Marty nodded. Yeah, I know the place. Bunch of housewives in expensive workout clothes pretending they're athletes. He leaned closer. How'd you find out? I told him about the text messages, the late nights at client meetings, the way Natalie had started working out obsessively and buying new underwear, expensive underwear that I never got to see her wear. Shit, Brad. I'm sorry. Marty poured himself a shot of whiskey and downed it. What are you going to do? I don't know. Divorce her, I guess. Split everything down the middle and start over. With what money? You said yourself the business is in the toilet. He had a point. Natalie made 10 times what I did, owned half of everything I'd built, and had connections throughout the county. In a divorce, she'd walk away with the house, the savings account, and probably my truck. I'd be lucky to keep my tools. Maybe I should just pretend I don't know, I said. Keep my mouth shut and hope it burns out on its own. That's not you, Brad. You never were the type to roll over and play dead. Marty refilled my beer without being asked. Remember sophomore year, when Tommy Brennan kept picking on that freshman kid? You didn't just tell a teacher. You waited for Tommy after school and beat the shit out of him in front of half the football team. That was different. I was 16 and stupid. No, you were 16 and right. There's a difference. Marty leaned against the bar, his expression serious. Look, I'm not saying you should do anything crazy, but don't let them walk all over you. Not Natalie, not this Derek asshole, not anybody. I was about to respond when the tavern door opened and Jessica Chen walked in. Jessa was Natalie's best friend and business partner, a social media influencer who'd built a small empire selling lifestyle advice to suburban moms. She was also the last person I wanted to see right now. Brad, she called out, her voice artificially bright. I was hoping I'd find you here. Natalie is so worried about you. Jessa approached the bar like she was walking a red carpet, her phone already in her hand. She was always filming something, her morning coffee, her workout routine, her thoughts on current events. Her Instagram account had over 50,000 followers, which she never let anyone forget. She sent you to check up on me? I asked. Of course not. I just happened to be in the neighborhood. Jessa glanced around the tavern with barely concealed disgust. Though, I have to say, this isn't exactly where I expected to find you on Natalie's birthday. Yeah, well, life's full of surprises. Jessa slid onto the bar stool next to mine, ignoring Marty's glare. She ordered a vodka tonic, which Marty served with the enthusiasm of a man handling radioactive waste. You know, Brad, I've been thinking about doing a podcast series about marriage, she said casually. The challenges that couples face when one partner is more successful than the other. The resentment that builds up. The way some men handle it better than others. Sounds fascinating, I said flatly. I think it could really help people. Show them that it's okay to admit when a relationship isn't working. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone go so they can find happiness with someone more compatible. I set down my beer bottle carefully, fighting the urge to throw it against the wall. Is that your professional opinion, Dr. Chen? It's just common sense, Brad. Natalie is in her prime. She's beautiful, successful, ambitious. She deserves to be with someone who can keep up with her, someone who can challenge her and support her dreams. Jessa took a sip of her drink and made a face. No offense, but when was the last time you two went anywhere nice together? When was the last time you surprised her with something special? I surprised her with a new transmission for her BMW last month. Cost me $3,000. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Jessa's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with the practiced ease of someone addicted to digital validation. Look, I'm not trying to be mean. I actually like you, Brad. You're a good guy. But good guys don't always make good husbands, especially when their wives outgrow them. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Around us, the tavern had gone quiet. Even the pool players had stopped their game to listen. Outgrow me, I repeated. It happens all the time. People change, they evolve, they want different things. It doesn't make anyone the villain. Jessa finished her drink and stood up. Just think about it, okay? Think about what's best for both of you. She walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Brad, you might want to shower before you go home. You smell like motor oil and desperation. The door closed behind her with a soft chime, leaving the tavern in stunned silence. I could feel every eye in the place on me, waiting to see how I'd react. Part of me wanted to chase after her and tell her exactly what I thought of her advice. Part of me wanted to crawl under the bar and hide. Instead, I finished my beer and asked for another. "What a bitch," Marty said quietly. "Yeah." I stared at my reflection in the mirror behind the bar, a tired-looking man with grease under his fingernails and defeat in his eyes. She's probably right, though. Maybe Natalie has outgrown me. Bullshit. You built a business from nothing. You own your own home. You're honest, hard-working, and loyal. If that's not good enough for her, then she's the problem, not you. Tell that to her 50,000 Instagram followers. Marty was quiet for a moment, then leaned closer. You know what your problem is, Brad? You're playing defense when you should be playing offense. They want you to roll over and disappear quietly so they can all feel good about themselves. Don't give them the satisfaction. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you remind them who they're dealing with. Show them that Brad Thompson isn't going down without a fight. Marty's eyes gleamed with something that might have been mischief. You said Derek owns that gym downtown? Yeah, CrossFit Central. Why? No reason, just curious. Marty smiled, and for the first time all night, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe it was time to stop playing defense. The next morning, I woke up on Marty's couch with a headache that felt like someone was using my skull for batting practice. Sunlight streamed through the blinds of his apartment above the tavern, and I could hear the sounds of early morning traffic on Main Street. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Natalie and 43 text messages that ranged from apologetic to furious to desperate. The last one, sent at 3:47 a.m., simply read, "Please come home. We need to talk." I deleted them all without reading the rest. Marty appeared from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking surprisingly alert for someone who'd matched me drink for drink the night before. "Sleep well, princess?" Like a baby with a hangover and a cheating wife. I accepted the coffee gratefully. "What time is it?" "Almost 9. Don't you have work today?" Mrs. Henderson's Honda. Shit. I sat up too quickly and immediately regretted it. I was supposed to have it done by 8. Already taken care of. I called her this morning and explained you had a family emergency. She said she could wait until this afternoon. Marty settled into his recliner with his own coffee. I also took the liberty of doing a little research on your friend Derek. What kind of research? The kind that involves public records and a healthy dose of curiosity. Marty pulled out his laptop and opened it on the coffee table. Turns out Mr. CrossFit isn't quite the success story he pretends to be. The screen showed a collection of documents, business licenses, loan applications, court filings. I leaned forward to get a better look. Derek Morrison, age 35, divorced, 2 kids he sees every other weekend. CrossFit Central opened 18 months ago with a $200,000 small business loan that's currently 3 months behind on payments. Marty scrolled down to another document. He's also got a personal bankruptcy from 2019, 2 DUIs, and a restraining order filed by his ex-wife for harassment. Jesus, how did you find all this? Public records are public, my friend. You just have to know where to look. Marty closed the laptop and grinned. Seems like your wife has excellent taste in men. I felt something shift inside me, a cold, calculating anger that was different from the hot rage of the night before. This wasn't just about Natalie cheating on me. This was about her choosing to cheat with a loser who was even worse off than I was. At least I paid my bills on time. There's more, Marty continued. I did some digging on Jessa, too. Turns out her influencer empire isn't quite as impressive as she claims. Half her followers are bots, and she's been getting paid to promote some pretty sketchy products. Weight loss pills that don't work, investment schemes that are barely legal, that kind of thing. Why are you telling me this? Because knowledge is power, and right now you need all the power you can get. Marty leaned forward, his expression serious. Look, I'm not saying you should do anything illegal or crazy, but these people have been treating you like garbage because they think they're better than you. Maybe it's time they learned they're not. I finished my coffee and stood up, testing my balance. The headache was still there, but it was manageable. I need to go home and face the music. You sure about that? You could stay here as long as you need to. Thanks, but I can't hide forever. Besides, I've got a business to run, even if it is circling the drain. Marty walked me to the door. Just remember what I said, Brad. You don't have to take this lying down. You've got options. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through downtown. Our little Michigan town was waking up, coffee shops opening, commuters heading to work, kids walking to school. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, which meant that by now, half the town probably knew about my dramatic exit from Natalie's party. The other half would know by lunch. My house sat on Maple Street in a neighborhood of modest ranch homes built in the 1970s. It wasn't much to look at: 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a 2-car garage, and a 1/4 acre of grass that needed mowing. But it was mine, or at least half of it was. I'd bought it with money saved from my first 5 years as an HVAC technician, back when I still thought hard work and determination were enough to guarantee success. Natalie's BMW was in the driveway, which meant she was home, probably practicing her apology speech or figuring out how to spin the whole situation to her advantage. She was good at that, turning her mistakes into other people's problems. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at our small dining table with a cup of coffee and her laptop. She'd changed out of her party dress into yoga pants and an oversized sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Without makeup, she looked younger and more vulnerable, which I knew was intentional. Natalie had always been strategic about her appearance. "Brad," she said softly, "I'm so glad you're home. I was worried sick." "Were you?" I poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot she'd made. "Or were you worried about damage control?" "That's not fair. I know I said some terrible things last night, but I was drunk and stressed and fucking Derek Morrison." The words hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. Natalie's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, denial, calculation, and finally resignation. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She closed her laptop and looked at me directly. "Brad, I need you to understand that this wasn't planned. It just happened. Derek and I have been working together on some marketing strategies for the gym, and we got close, and one thing led to another." "Marketing strategies? Is that what they're calling it now? Don't be crude. This is hard enough without you being an asshole about it." Natalie stood up and moved to the counter, putting distance between us. "Look, I know you're hurt and angry, and you have every right to be, but we need to talk about this like adults." "Okay. Let's talk like adults." I sat down at the table and looked at her. "How long?" 3 months. "Where? Does that really matter?" "It matters to me," she sighed. "His apartment mostly, sometimes the gym after hours, once at the Marriott downtown when you thought I was at a conference in Grand Rapids." Each answer was like a small knife between my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral. "Are you in love with him?" "I don't know. Maybe. He makes me feel alive, excited about the future, like anything is possible." She turned to face me, and I could see tears in her eyes. "When was the last time you made me feel that way, Brad?" "I don't know. When was the last time you gave me the chance?" "That's not fair. I've tried to include you in my world, but you never want to participate. You hate my friends. You complain about spending money on nice things. You act like my success is somehow a threat to your masculinity. Maybe because you've made it clear that my world isn't good enough for you anymore." We stared at each other across the kitchen, 2 people who'd shared a bed for 8 years but had somehow become strangers. I could see the exact moment when Natalie made her decision, when she shifted from apologetic to aggressive. "You're right," she said. "Your world isn't good enough for me anymore. I've outgrown this house, this town, this life. I want more, Brad. I want travel and adventure and financial security. I want a partner who can keep up with me, not someone who thinks a night at Marty's Tavern is the height of entertainment." "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should consider a separation, give each other some space to figure out what we really want." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'll stay at Jess's for a while. We can work out the details later." The details. The house, the cars, the business assets. We'll need lawyers, obviously, but I hope we can keep this civilized. She moved toward the stairs. "I'm going to pack a bag." I sat in the kitchen for a long time after she left, listening to her move around upstairs, drawers opening and closing, hangers scraping against the closet rod, the sound of her suitcase being dragged across the hardwood floor. The sounds of my marriage ending. When she came back downstairs with 2 suitcases and a garment bag, I was still sitting at the table. "I'll call you in a few days," she said, "once we've both had time to process this." "Natalie." She stopped at the door and looked back at me. "Derek's gym is 3 months behind on its loan payments. He's broke, divorced, and has 2 DUIs. Just thought you should know what you're getting into." Her face flushed red. "How do you—" "Never mind. It doesn't matter. At least he has ambition. At least he's trying to build something instead of just maintaining the status quo. Yeah, he's a real winner." She left without another word, and I watched through the kitchen window as she loaded her bags into the BMW and drove away. The house felt different without her. Quieter, but also somehow lighter. Like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had suddenly been lifted. I pulled out my phone and called Mrs. Henderson to let her know her car would be ready in an hour. Then I called my 3 biggest clients to check on outstanding invoices. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I smiled. If Natalie wanted a war, she'd get one. But it would be fought on my terms, using my rules. And I was very good at fixing things that were broken. 3 weeks after Natalie moved out, I was starting to understand the difference between being alone and being lonely. Alone was coming home to a quiet house and eating dinner in front of the TV. Alone was doing laundry on Sunday mornings and grocery shopping for one. Lonely was lying awake at 2 a.m., wondering if your wife was in bed with another man, and if she ever thought about the 8 years you'd spent building a life together. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. Turns out there's a big difference. My business was actually improving. Without Natalie's constant complaints about money, I'd been able to focus on work instead of worrying about credit card bills and mortgage payments. I'd landed 2 new commercial accounts, a small office building and a restaurant downtown, and Mrs. Henderson had recommended me to half her neighborhood. Word of mouth was still the best advertising in a town like ours. I was under the hood of a 2018 Camry, replacing a radiator hose, when I heard footsteps in the driveway. I looked up to see Derek Morrison walking toward my garage like he owned the place. He was wearing expensive workout clothes and designer sneakers that probably cost more than I made in a week. His hair was perfectly styled, and his tan looked like it came from a bottle. "Brad Thompson," he said, flashing a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. I was hoping we could have a little chat. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and studied him. Up close, Derek was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'10" and built like someone who spent more time posing in front of mirrors than doing actual work. His hands were soft and manicured, with a Rolex that screamed, "Look at me, I'm successful," to anyone within 50 feet. "Derek Morrison," I said. "I was wondering when you'd show up. You know who I am? Small town. Word gets around." I closed the hood of the Camry and leaned against it. "What can I do for you?" "I think you know why I'm here." Derek's smile faded slightly. "Natalie told me about your conversation, about the things you said." Which things were those? The lies you told her about my business, my finances, my personal life. I don't know where you got your information, but it's wrong, and I don't appreciate you spreading rumors. Public records aren't rumors, Derek. They're facts. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and opened the photos Marty had sent me. Screenshots of loan documents, court filings, business licenses. CrossFit Central, Incorporated, March 2022, initial loan amount $200,000. Current status, 93 days past due on payments. Personal bankruptcy filed October 2019. Restraining order filed by Michelle Morrison, case number... That's enough. Derek's face had gone red and his hands were clenched into fists. I don't know how you got that information, but it's none of your business. You're right. Your financial problems aren't my business. But my wife is. I put the phone back in my pocket. Or was, anyway. Natalie deserves better than this. Derek gestured around my garage like it was a crime scene. She deserves someone who can provide for her, who can give her the life she wants. Someone with ambition and vision, not just some small-town mechanic who's given up on his dreams. Funny thing about dreams, I said. Sometimes they turn into nightmares. Derek stepped closer, trying to use his height to intimidate me. It might have worked on someone else, but I'd been in my share of fights over the years. Look, I know this is hard for you to accept, but Natalie and I are together now. She's moved on, and you should too. Find yourself a nice girl who appreciates the simple life, someone more on your level. Someone more on my level. You know what I mean? Someone who doesn't have big dreams or expensive tastes. Someone who'd be happy living in a house like this, driving an old truck, shopping at Walmart. Derek's smile returned, but it was uglier now. There's nothing wrong with being ordinary, Brad. Most people are. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who was fucking my wife and telling me I should be grateful for it. This man who was drowning in debt, but acting like he was better than me. This man who thought he could come to my home and lecture me about knowing my place. You're right, I said finally. I am ordinary. I fix things for a living. Air conditioners, heaters, cars, whatever needs fixing. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest work. And you know what I've learned after 20 years of fixing things? What's that? Everything breaks eventually. Everything. The expensive stuff, the cheap stuff, the stuff that's supposed to last forever. It all breaks down sooner or later. I smiled at him. The trick is knowing how to break it so it can't be fixed. Derek's smile faltered. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just thinking out loud. I turned back to the Camry and opened the hood again. You should probably get going. I've got work to do. This isn't over, Brad. No, I said without looking up. It's not. I listened to his footsteps retreat down the driveway, then heard his car door slam and his engine start. A BMW, of course. Probably leased, probably behind on payments. But it looked good from the outside, just like Derek himself. That evening, I drove to CrossFit Central to see what I was dealing with. The gym occupied a converted warehouse on the edge of downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed off rows of expensive equipment and motivational posters. The parking lot was full of luxury cars and SUVs, the kind of vehicles driven by people who wanted everyone to know they had money. I parked across the street and watched the evening crowd work out. Through the windows, I could see Derek moving from station to station, adjusting equipment and chatting with clients. He was in his element here, surrounded by people who bought into his vision of success through suffering. The irony wasn't lost on me, a man who was failing at business teaching other people how to succeed at life. At 8:30, the last clients left, and Derek began closing up. He turned off the lights, activated the alarm system, and locked the front door. Then he walked to his BMW and drove away, probably heading to Jessa's apartment where Natalie was waiting for him. I sat in my truck for another hour, thinking about what Derek had said, about dreams and ambition, and knowing your place in the world, about ordinary people living ordinary lives in ordinary houses. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was ordinary. But ordinary people knew how to fix things, and more importantly, they knew how to break them. I started my truck and drove home, already making plans. The Harvest Festival was the biggest event of the year in our little town, a weekend-long celebration that drew visitors from 3 counties. Main Street was closed to traffic, lined with food trucks and craft booths, and a temporary stage was set up in front of the courthouse for local bands and community announcements. It was the kind of wholesome, small-town event that Natalie used to complain about. Too many ordinary people having ordinary fun. This year, she was attending as Derek's girlfriend, playing the role of supportive partner while he worked the crowd and promoted his gym. I'd seen them earlier, walking hand in hand past the booths, stopping to chat with potential clients and pose for photos that would undoubtedly end up on social media. Derek was wearing a CrossFit Central t-shirt and his fake smile, while Natalie looked radiant in a sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. They looked perfect together, successful, attractive, ambitious. The kind of power couple that small towns love to gossip about. Too bad it was all built on lies. I'd spent the past month doing what I did best, fixing problems. Derek's financial problems, specifically. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you know the right people and have access to public records. A few phone calls to his creditors, some anonymous tips to the Better Business Bureau, a carefully worded email to the health department about safety violations at his gym. Nothing illegal, nothing that couldn't be traced back to legitimate concerns from anonymous citizens. The results had been spectacular. CrossFit Central was now 4 months behind on its loan payments, facing a health department investigation and dealing with a flood of negative reviews from customers who'd experienced everything from broken equipment to unsanitary conditions. Derek's landlord had started eviction proceedings, and 3 of his biggest clients had canceled their memberships. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was about to be served. At 2 p.m., the festival's main event began, the annual Community Awards ceremony, where local business owners and civic leaders were recognized for their contributions to the town. Derek had somehow managed to get himself nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year, probably through Natalie's connections in the real estate world. They were both on stage now, Derek at the podium, giving a speech about following your dreams and never giving up. I stood at the back of the crowd, wearing my best jeans and a clean t-shirt, holding a manila envelope that contained the real story of Derek Morrison's entrepreneurial journey. Bank statements, loan documents, court records, police reports, everything Marty and I had been able to dig up over the past month. All of it public record, all of it true, all of it devastating. And that's why I believe that with hard work and determination, anyone can achieve their dreams, Derek was saying. Success isn't about where you come from or how much money you start with. It's about vision, dedication, and the courage to take risks. The crowd applauded politely. I noticed that most of the applause was coming from Natalie and her friends, who were clustered near the front of the stage like a support group for delusional thinking. Before we present this year's awards, the mayor said, taking the microphone from Derek, we'd like to open the floor for community comments. This is your chance to recognize someone who's made a difference in your life, or to share something important with your neighbors. I raised my hand. The mayor squinted in my direction, probably wondering if he should pretend not to see me. But there were too many people watching, and ignoring a raised hand would look bad on camera. The local cable access station was filming the whole thing for their weekend programming. Yes, Brad Thompson, you have something to share? I walked through the crowd toward the stage, feeling hundreds of eyes on me. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as people recognized me, the HVAC guy whose wife had left him for the fitness instructor, the loser who couldn't keep his woman happy, the ordinary man who didn't know his place. Thank you, Mayor Johnson, I said, taking the microphone. I just wanted to say a few words about entrepreneurship and following your dreams. Derek's smile looked like it had been painted on with a brush. Natalie was staring at me with a mixture of horror and fascination, probably wondering what I was planning to do. Jessa had her phone out, ready to capture whatever happened next for her social media followers. See, I've been thinking a lot lately about what makes someone successful, I continued. Is it vision, determination, the courage to take risks, or is it something else entirely? I opened the manila envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. Take Derek Morrison here, Entrepreneur of the Year nominee, owner of CrossFit Central, motivational speaker, and all-around inspiration to our community. I held up the first document. According to his loan application, Derek started his business with a $200,000 investment, claiming he had the experience and financial backing to make it successful. Derek tried to grab the microphone, but I stepped away from him. But according to these bankruptcy records, Derek filed for personal bankruptcy just 3 years ago after his previous business, a supplement company called Peak Performance Nutrition, collapsed amid allegations of selling counterfeit products. I held up another document. And according to these court records, his ex-wife filed a restraining order against him for harassment and threats of violence. The crowd was dead silent now. Even the kids had stopped running around to listen. And here's my personal favorite, I said, pulling out the final document. A police report from last month where Derek was cited for public intoxication and disorderly conduct after he was found passed out in his car outside a bar in Grand Rapids. Apparently, he told the arresting officer that he was living his best life and following his dreams. Derek lunged for the microphone again, but I handed it to Mayor Johnson and stepped back. "Those are lies!" Derek shouted. "He's making it all up because he can't handle the fact that his wife chose a better man." "Public records aren't lies, Derek," I said calmly. "They're just facts. And the fact is, you're a fraud who's been selling false hope to people who deserve better." The crowd erupted. Some people were shouting questions, others were demanding answers, and a few were already pulling out their phones to Google Derek's name. I could see Natalie trying to push through the crowd toward the stage, her face red with embarrassment and rage. But I wasn't done yet. "There's one more thing," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Derek's been telling people that his gym is successful, that he's a role model for aspiring entrepreneurs. But the truth is, CrossFit Central is 4 months behind on its loan payments and facing eviction. The health department is investigating safety violations, and his insurance company is threatening to cancel his policy." I looked directly at Derek, who was standing frozen on the stage like a deer in headlights. "So when you talk about following your dreams, Derek, maybe you should mention that sometimes dreams turn into nightmares, and sometimes the people who trust you end up paying the price for your failures." I turned and walked away from the stage, leaving Derek to face the crowd of angry customers and disappointed investors. Behind me, I could hear voices raised in anger, people demanding refunds and explanations. Someone was shouting about a class action lawsuit. As I reached the edge of the crowd, I felt a hand grab my arm. I turned to see Natalie, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. "How could you do this?" she whispered. "How could you humiliate me like this in front of everyone?" "I didn't humiliate you, Nat. You did that all by yourself when you chose to cheat on your husband with a con artist." I gently pulled my arm free. I just provided the facts. What people do with those facts is up to them. You've ruined everything. My reputation, my business relationships, my future with Derek. Your future with Derek was already ruined. He's broke, desperate, and facing criminal charges. I just saved you from finding out the hard way. I looked at her one more time. This woman I'd loved for 8 years, this stranger who'd chosen ambition over loyalty. You said I was ordinary, that I'd given up on my dreams. Maybe you were right, but at least my dreams were real. I walked away from her, away from the chaos on the stage, away from the life I'd spent 8 years building with someone who never appreciated what we had. The crowd was still shouting, still demanding answers from Derek, who seemed to have disappeared entirely, probably running for his BMW, assuming it hadn't been repossessed yet. As I reached my truck, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Jessa approaching, her phone still in her hand, her expression unreadable. "That was quite a performance," she said. "It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. The truth can be a weapon when it's used correctly." She smiled, but there was something cold in her eyes. "You know, I always underestimated you, Brad. I thought you were just another small-town loser who couldn't handle his wife's success. But this was brilliant. Ruthless, but brilliant." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Jessa glanced back toward the stage, where Derek was nowhere to be seen and Natalie was surrounded by reporters from the local newspaper. "You know what the funny thing is? I was the one who introduced Natalie to Derek. I thought it would be good for her to have some excitement in her life, someone who could match her ambition. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that this isn't over. Natalie will recover from this. She's stronger than you think. And Derek? Well, Derek was always expendable. But you've shown me that you're more dangerous than I realized." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't like dangerous people, Brad. They make me nervous." "Good," I said. "You should be nervous." I climbed into my truck and drove away, leaving Jessa standing in the parking lot with her phone and her threats. In my rearview mirror, I could see the festival continuing, people eating funnel cake, kids playing games, families enjoying a perfect autumn afternoon, life going on as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Derek's business was finished, his reputation destroyed. Natalie's carefully constructed image as a successful power couple was in ruins. And I, ordinary, small-town Brad Thompson, had reminded everyone that sometimes the underdog wins. I drove home to my modest house on Maple Street, to my quiet garage and my simple life. Tomorrow I'd get back to work fixing things for people who appreciated honest service. I'd pay my bills on time, maintain my equipment, and build my business one satisfied customer at a time. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't Instagram-worthy, it was just real. And sometimes, real is enough.